Hi, welcome to the Linguist Library. I'm Emily, and today we're talking about historical fiction. If you've been to the channel for a hot minute, you know that historical fiction is one of my favorite genres, and I'm often reading and talking about historical fiction books and non-fiction historical books. I do like fiction better because it gives the author a little bit more liberty to couple their writing abilities with their imagination, so they get to fill in the gaps, you know? Unlike historians who kind of like tied to the truth and whatnot. But for the purpose of this video, we're going to define which historical fiction books we're going to be talking about. Because thing is, historical fiction is a large umbrella term and it has several subgenres beneath it. And historical fiction, in reality, I mean, if we're going to go for the definition of things, we're just talking about a historical setting. So you choose a city and you choose a time period, and bam, it's a historical fiction. But for my list, I'm choosing authors and specific books that the main plot has to do with the historical background. So it's not just a romance set in Victorian England, for example. It is something to do with the Victorian life and the commentary of the social climate of the time. That's part of the book. So those are the rules for this video. Okay, so the main character is going to be an adult, and the historical setting is part of the main plot. So those are really the true criteria of this videos. Those are the only ones that I really focused on. So that being said, there are loads of classics that fit into that category. They're historical fiction and the main character is an adult. So, you know, I'm not going to be talking about them today because the overarching genre for them, in my view, is they're a classic. So I'll talk about them when I talk about classics, but I will show a few on this screen. Now, for a book to be considered by the highbrow society, academia, to be considered historical fiction, it has to be written over 50 years from the period that the book is set, so that there's more clarity and the feelings of the person who's writing the book haven't really been directly affected by the story that they're writing about. So it's not like they're writing about their fathers or themselves. So even though we have books that are considered historical fiction when they come out, a lot of people still don't add it to their historical fiction list because it was written by an author who kind of like either lived through it. For example, Ernest Hemingway in World War I. Is his World War I book really historical fiction? Because did he have enough time to have clarity to write about it? So that's up to you. Those are all personal criteria that you get to decide. But for the purpose of this video, now that we have firmly established our criteria and we have firmly established the books that we are not going to be talking about, let's talk about the books that we are going to be talking about. So, at number 10 in my list, I want to talk about an Irish writer called Colm Tóibín. And he wrote this book that I want to specifically talk about and recommend called The Master. And this is about the life of Henry James. Henry James, giant of English literature, and probably has one of the best titles in the language, The Turn of the Screw. So this is about his life, and he talks about Henry James in this very fan POV. So it's flattering, and it doesn't really dive into his personal life or his love life so much, but it does talk about him and his accomplishments. And I really enjoyed Tóibín's prose. I think that, to be honest, I first came across him through an essay that he wrote on Clarice Lispector, and then I realized that he was a historical fiction writer, and he wrote this book that won the Man Booker Prize, and I really enjoyed it. So that's how I came across him, and I love this. So that's my number 10 on this list. Number 9, it's Jodi Picoult. Now, Jodi Picoult, anything that she writes is entertaining, but this novel that I have here, The Storyteller, was probably one of the first ones that I read by her, and it's the one that made me fall in love with her. Now, Jodi is, most of the books that I read by her were from that World War II era. This one is about the Holocaust, and it starts in the US and it takes you back to Europe. Her character, the main character, is going to a grief group, and she meets this elderly gentleman, and the story takes you to Europe from there. But it's very engaging. It won New York Times bestseller author, and she's been really famous, I think, ever since her novel. There was an adaptation by Cameron Diaz. I think it's Her Sister's Keeper or something to do with the sister. I'll put it on the screen. It's a very sentimental novel. She is a bit of a sentimental author, but, you know, her prose, delicious. You finish her book even before you realize that you're reading a book. The number 8 on this list, so number 8 in this list is a bit of a classic, okay? So I couldn't stay away from my classics too much, but this is a very underrated classic. Okay, is it underrated? Maybe not. But this is I'll tell you what. I don't hear about this book very often, and that's the only reason why I'm going to have him on the list. And I'm talking about Charles Frazier. Charles Frazier wrote Cold Mountain, and my edition has Nicole Kidman, Renee Zellweger, and Jude Law. An American Odyssey. So we are talking about a hero trying to make it home to his fictional Ithaca, where Nicole Kidman is waiting for him, or Ada, her character. But this is a epic book about the Civil War. The setting is in the Civil War, and it's very acclaimed. Obviously, you can see there's a movie made about it. It is a classic, but it's not very spoken about, so it's the only one that I decided to put in here. Number 7 is actually my first historical fiction novel. So this was the first historical fiction novel I ever read. I used to read pretty much just mystery, thrillers, and that kind of book. Those kind of, like, I grew up on those. And I came across this book when I was in university in Portugal. So much so that this is in Portuguese. This book is in Portuguese. But this is by Margaret George, and this is the book that I read. First book I read by her is this one, which is the Memoirs of Cleopatra, which of course is fiction because you can't write a memoir unless you are the person. But so we have a first person narration of Cleopatra and how she saw her life. And Margaret George is fantastic, gifted storyteller. She really has you engaged. You're going to, to feel the story. And this really made me fall in love with authors who know how to use their imagination to fill in the gap. So basically, this is what made me fall in love with historical fiction. I love me a powerful woman, so Cleopatra was the way in. But yeah, I thoroughly recommend Margaret George and all of her novels. She is a gifted storyteller, and she tends to focus on antiquity, like, the far past. My number 6 novel is set in New York, and this is called The Alienist. And the subgenre is mystery thriller. So this was also adapted. I have to get rid of that sticker. Um, this was also adapted into a series, great series with Dakota Fannin. I love her. She's great. So this is about a serial killer, very graphic novel. So if you're not really into gore, maybe this one is not for you. But, the back of the book describes this novel as a conjure of the Gilded Age in Manhattan, part Arthur Conan Doyle and part Silence of the Lambs. And I think it makes sense. Yeah, that's a good way to describe this. So, mystery novel, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle meets Silence of the Lamb, because it's a bit more of a thriller, borderline horror, but it is super engaging. It's like it's one of those one-sitting books that you just, gobble down. And it's set in the Gilded Age. So if you're interested in the Gilded Age at all, this is a good book. My fifth recommendation, if you've been to the channel, you probably heard of her because I've been raving about her for a while. I discovered her last year and I bought 3 books already. So I am talking about Marie Benedict. She is one of my latest historical fiction discoveries, and I have read 3 of her books. I have a review of this one on the channel, and this is probably still one of my favorites. So this is about Lady Clementine Churchill, Winston Churchill's wife. And this is about what she did in World War II. So if you're focused on World War II, if you like World War II, Marie Benedict focuses on that. Although I've seen some of her other novels kind of focus on modern history, like 21st century, but not just World War II. Although the ones I read were the 3 I read were mostly around that area. And they're all set in Europe. So this one focuses on the life of Lady Clementine, and it really, I already admired this couple, so I think that helped a lot with me liking this book. But it is one that I definitely recommend if you want to read. If you want to watch my entire review on it, I'm going to link it somewhere here in the cards. But for this video, I want to recommend this one. So this is The Only Woman in the Room. And this one focuses on Hedy Lamarr, the Hollywood bombshell, who was gorgeous, but also extremely intelligent. She is known as the mother of Bluetooth and Wi-Fi because she invented this hopping technology that pretty much kind of like helped the Allies win against the Germans in World War II. And this is a fascinating story. It starts in Vienna and it ends in Hollywood. So great book if you are starting with historical fiction and you don't know where to start. My third book by her is on Dr. Franklin, Rosalind Franklin, and she's one of the scientists who helped map out DNA and RNA, but back then she didn't get enough credit. And that's one thing that Marie Benedict has in common. All of her books have in common. She writes about female figures that didn't get the praise they deserved, pretty much like Margaret George. Although Cleopatra is quite famous, isn't it? She did get praise, but she also got ostracized, if you will, or I don't know the word for it. But she definitely got her name around. People know about her. Okay, so now we're getting to the top of the list. These are my favorite ever. So number 4, I have talked about this quartet before, but I am going to talk about it again because it is a great historical fiction and it's set in Italy. So the Neapolitan Quartet by Elena Ferrante is a quartet set in Naples in Italy, and this is post-war, so post-World War II, the recovery period, and it's Just one of the most exciting stories that I've read in a while, set in Italy. And this has the amazing friendship between Elena, the main character, and her best friend. So her best friend is actually the narrator, and that's the point of view that we get. And they have this obsession with each other, but also this love for each other. And yeah, just a great series that will definitely let you know if you're into the literary subgenre. So this is historical fiction, literary fiction. Now to the top 3. So for the next author, I don't actually have any physical copies with me because they are not in my library yet, and I have yet to buy some more. But I fell in love with him over a decade ago, maybe. And he was one of the first espionage books that I read. So his books are mostly set around World War II. I'm talking about Ken Follett. And I'm going to focus on The Eye of the Needle because it is one of the most delicious, fast-paced novels you can find. And it's historical fiction, but the subgenre is espionage, so spy novels. I love me a spy novel. I recently talked about The Key to Rebecca. So that novel is a spy novel as well, but that one is set in Europe and in Egypt. I think it's like continental Europe and then Egypt. And he uses Rebecca by Daphne du Vannier, or his main character, the German spy, uses the book Rebecca to send encrypted messages. So The Key to Rebecca is a great espionage novel, historical fiction, subgenre spy, espionage, but so is The Eye of the Needle, another World War II, fantastic. Kind of like mythological fantasy, historical fiction set in the UK. You can take a look at Bernard Cornwell. He is amazing. His fantasy is mostly mythology, so there's like not necessarily a magical system for you to learn. It's mostly mythology. And it feels more like historical fiction than it does mythology and fantasy. But because it does have those elements, I'm not going to put him on the list specifically, officially, but he is an honorable mention. Now, my number 1 historical fiction author of all time. I have a ton of her books. I'm going to show you 2 because I want to talk about these, and mostly I want to talk about why I love her. So I am talking about Philippa Gregory. Now, Philippa Gregory is an English author, and I met her through this novel, The Other Boleyn Girl. Now, what she does that is so unique and so fascinating is her point of view. Usually she chooses the point of view of someone who has, I don't want to say the most to lose, but it could be the person who has the most to lose. Like on this novel, we follow Anne Boleyn. So we have Mary Boleyn and Anne Boleyn, and we get to hear about both of them here. But as I said, she focuses on the point of view of the person who has the most to lose. So we're looking at Anne Boleyn, and she's telling the story, and it's fascinating. So the second book by Philippa Gregory that I want to talk about is The Virgin's Lover. And this one is told from the point of view of the wife. So this one, we're talking about England's greatest queen, right? Elizabeth I, the Virgin Lover. The queen, or the monarch, I should say, that the state of Virginia was named after, the Virgin Queen. So, as you can tell by these 2 novels, Philippa Gregory tends to focus on around that time period, at least the ones I read by her, kind of like 1500 England. These 2 are set in England. And I had a fantastic time. All right, everyone, I think that's it for this video. I hope you liked my authors. These are some of the best that I have come across. And, you know, make sure to check out the honorable mentions too, because they are all amazing. Thank you so much for your support. If you haven't yet, don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit that subscribe button if you want to support the channel. It really, really helps. Don't forget to share this video with people who might have the same taste as you. And let me know in the comments, what's the best historical fiction novel you've read and recommend? Do you have a favorite time period? Do you have a favorite area or country or region that you like to read about? Do you read historical nonfiction? Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye.